Grind it out. Push through. Don't say anything. It feels like toughness, but over time, it's costing you more than you know.
It is actually detrimental to the team. So you think that making it through the day is the win, being durable, being present, being there. That's kind of the brother's keeper aspects.
After more than 2 decades in the utility industry, Nick Magana tells us how to recognize the warning signs that you're losing control and provides a field-tested framework for resetting your performance when the stakes are highest.
That space between stimulus and response, and there's a lot of things that can happen. You tap into the physical to get into the psychological.
This is the WorkReady Podcast. Okay, Nick, so the person listening right now, they show up, they grind, and if you ask them how they are doing, they say fine. What are we going to give them today that they don't already have?
Hopefully, we're going to enlighten them that mental preparation fuels physical performance. And I think that's a large topic that is often overlooked in the importance of the physical, the psychological feeding the physical. And so hopefully through the conversation, we can help build the awareness for the listener to see how they can go from a survive state to a thrive state. And so I'm excited to talk to you more about that.
Like I said, Nick, you have, I work with tons of utilities, but I think one of the best industrial athlete programs in the nation. Why do you call it an industrial athlete program?
I basically see it as 2 different approaches, right? So I oversee ergonomics for the company as well. So how do we make the work less stressful to the employee? And in the industrial athlete perspective is how do we make them more resistant to injury? How do we build resilience into them? How do we get more durability? And so that is the same approach that's done with athletes, right? How do you get them to get a long career and not get hurt in their rookie season? And so, that's really our approach is to how do we make them more well-rounded? And I think that there's traditional industrial athlete programs that may focus heavily on the physical resilience side, which is obviously important. But I think sometimes it's a lens that's kind of brought over from traditional safety, because traditional safety looks at physical hazards. And so we just look at the physical, the things that we can see. And I think what is going to, set us apart from what we do is that mental side, which is the psychology, which is the things we don't see, which are the things that are happening between our ears that fuel what we do and how we do it and why we do it. That is why, we call it an industrial athlete program, because it does take from the traditional sports industry and puts things into the utility space, which is, to me, is very high risk, high consequence, very dynamic environment, which is also similar to what different athletes experience as well. Maybe the difference is just the jersey they wear.
What I really like about what you distinguish is that, oftentimes when people hear the mental aspect, they think about mental health, and that's obviously an important component, but there's also this mental performance side. It's about being focused. It's about being ready to perform at the highest level in those critical moments. And so maybe explain a little bit more of how you incorporate the sports psychology or the mental performance aspects into your industrial athlete program.
We're teaching them how to use their body properly, like as a tool, essentially, like another way of looking at a tool, and how to use it so it doesn't break down and use it properly. We'll cover something mental oriented in one session, and then we'll cover something physical, and we kind of just have this rotation, because it's important to do that, because they go hand in hand, right? So you can teach someone proper lifting techniques, but they have to have that mental awareness of when to apply it, when to be focused, and not to be distracted. So you teach them how to be in the moment, how to be more purposeful.
And what has surprised you most in terms of how people have received this content and this education? Has it been embraced, or has there been a little bit of pushback?
I was nervous to start to deploy this because psychology is very abstract. And it's a very male dominant. The other field workers is that it's a male dominant population for the most part, and so they're very physical beings doing physical work. And so they're used to grabbing things that are tangible, and psychology isn't so tangible. So you have to be creative in how you walk them through and make them aware of how they think and how they approach different things. I have clips of different athletes, from UFC fighters to baseball players to hockey players to tennis players to different sports psychologists that are, we use their clips and we piggyback off those and have discussions on talking about the concepts and how they're applied, and then roll that into the work life and the different situations that they'll have on the field. But honestly, it also rolls into off the field, because you're human and everything sometimes just collides. And I think that's where they they realize the benefit of it. That it's not something that you can just turn on for work, but don't use it outside of work. That these are essentially life skills. The better that you can, manage your inner game, you're going to manage your outer game, essentially.
I love that idea of the inner game versus the outer game. And we talk a lot about, as you mentioned, physical readiness on job sites. But then if we're talking about industrial athlete mindset, like on the job site, can you paint a picture for us of what that actually looks like in practice? So what somebody would take away from some of your initial training and how that translates into day-to-day work?
Great question. One of the things or the concepts that we teach, and again, I'm going to mention it here a lot, is that survive versus thrive. Is that how do you set yourself up for success? And a lot of it is being aware of your habits and routines, right? And so I think that is it, is looking at your day as different phases, and within those phases, you're going to have different things that you're going to accomplish, right? And so you have to be mindful of what you're going to plug into that. And what we teach is that that's the thrive state, where you are planning to do things so you don't feel like you're flying by the seat of your pants, because there's a lot of the culture that you would see is that a lot of guys are sleep deprived, and they will use a lot of nicotine and caffeine to rev themselves up in the morning. There's something, artificial, and then they'll high pressure, high consequence situations. So they're really heightened. Their nervous system's revved up, and then they got to go home, and then now we got to kind of rev it back down. And if you don't have good routines that are natural, you're going to use things like alcohol, and then you're going to be on the screen and a lot of dopamine cycles, and then those things are going to keep you up, and then you're not going to get good sleep, and then you're going to rinse, wash, and repeat. So one of the things we do is we break down every aspect of the day, and show them that you can plan everything that you're doing. And so you don't have that you're flying by the seat of the pants and just reactive. We teach you how to be responsive, all the different phases, that things that from wake up, things that you can do from when you're waking up, things when you're getting setting yourself up before you go to pre-shift, things you can do to check your readiness about being properly fueled. Am I alert enough? All these things are about building awareness throughout your whole day. And so that's really the take home, and the things that we help to help them help themselves to build structure into their everyday, not just work life, but personal life.
Vimosity is more than training. It's a safety and readiness platform trusted by companies to keep their field professionals strong, healthy, and ready for the job. Now we're launching something new, the WorkReady community. It's the first online community built exclusively for field employees, a place to connect, learn, and lead the future of our industry. Join us and be part of the movement.
On a previous WorkReady podcast episode with Dr. Jim Bauman, he talked so much about routine as helping to calm the brain and just have that predictability when people are getting ready to perform at a high level. But it probably equates very much to when somebody's about ready to perform a high risk task as well. What are some of the cues that you give people, or how do you guide them when they're about ready to perform a high risk task so that they can recenter themselves and be focused on that so that they can perform it safely?
So Two areas that we focus in on is self-talk, right? And using meditation and imagery. And so, from an imagery and meditation perspective, we teach them how to downregulate their nervous system, right? So how do you get out of that limbic and getting nervous and chaotic, and how do you activate your prefrontal cortex? And we tell them that this is something that you can practice. And it goes great when we teach our groundmen, for example, because they're going to have tests at the end to become a groundman when they're going through their classes. And we say, guess what? You can practice imagery because sometimes your brain doesn't know if it's reality or something you've imagined, right? It's kind of like that Stoic quote from like Seneca, you suffer more in imagination than reality. And so we tell them you can actually leverage that. You can go through situations that you normally do, or even if you make a mistake, and see how would I react to it, how would I respond to it. And so we do teach them the skill of imagery, but then also in the moment, it's not just to be focused, but it's also how do you refocus, how do you lock in, and these are self-talk power phrases. So that's another thing that we teach them is to be aware of the power phrases that they already use, but maybe they don't think about it in that way, and to come up with different situations to where they are feeling that they're either out of control or losing control, and where these phrases can help get them out of an emotion and get them back into a focus. And so these are the skills that we work with them on and help them build, so they have these tools in the toolbox that they can take into those high pressure situations that you're talking about, and they can do it just like a batter, where batters, oh man, I've got 2 strikes on me already. They step out, and what do? They look at their bat, right? They're looking at their bat, and all they're doing is refocusing. They step back in, and they take that focus from the bat, and they look at the focus of the pitcher, right? And it's all routine. And so we tell them these are things that you have control over these moments. And as long as you have a routine to pull from when you get flustered, you'll always have an opportunity to respond versus react.
You talked about, these men and women, again, are in these high pressure situations. You're working on high voltage, there could be, there's always potential risk there. So you're at that heightened state, you're maybe slamming caffeine, nicotine, everything is on high. And then the next critical part of the day is walking through your door at home. And what are some of the skills that you have taught people of how to, separate that intensity on the job to how to set that aside, so that when they walk through the door at home, they can wear 2 different hats so that they don't feel like they're in that amped up state?
That one's a challenge, and we teach them a lot of concepts from Atomic Habits, right? So that James Clear. And so we tell them that, a lot of things is all your behaviors are tied to your identity. And so it's almost like when you're adjusting your environment, it's also a trigger to when you're transitioning from one role to the next role. And so I think it's important to do that, is to be able to do your best to be mindful to leave work at work, and where you can get into a place to where you are not going to be reminded of work in the same fashion that you would do, let's say for sleep. If you're putting your work boots right by the door, somewhere you can see from bed, it's like, oh yeah, I got to go to work, and it makes me anxious because work can be stressful. So if you can learn to separate the things that would either consciously or unconsciously trigger things about work, and not allow you to be in the present, let's say in like your family life, I think understanding how your environment affects you is really important. And those are things that we would talk about largely with routine, right? Because you would build that into your routine of how to do that transition from, being in your sport to being in your home life.
You mentioned a keyword there is identity. And, oftentimes I think people get their identity from the things that they do or the things that people say about them. And they're like, I'm a lineman, I'm a groundman, but it's just like, that's just part of what you do. It's not your identity. Can you explain a little bit more about how identity drives behavior and how they may show up in different environments like the job site or at home?
Yeah, and that ends up being a pretty in-depth conversation when we have that, because one of the core principles that we teach is MVP, And that's taken from Brian Kane, who's a mental performance coach for professional sports. And so MVP, your mission, your vision. So what's your legacy? What is that big picture that you're doing, everything that's going to fit into? And then what are the accomplishments that you want to have to work towards that legacy? And then the P is like your principles, your values. What are those things that you operationalize every day that ties into the big picture? So identity is huge, especially for like linemen or the utility space. No different than an athlete where they make their identity their sport. And so we have that conversation like, hey, you might get hurt, or you might feel that you're doing this role for 5 years and you say it's not for me. Right. And so you might have to transition. But if you have your MVP mapped out, which is something that we work with the employees to do, you can say, I bring my MVP to life in this role, but this role isn't meant for me anymore. I can point my MVP, my compass at something else and still get purpose, still get meaning. Everything that you do is like casting a vote for your identity. So you need to be conscious of that. And that's something that we teach the field employees.
Let's dive into the MVP a little bit more. I think that this is a great area to focus on because, again, it's so easy to get our identity from all these other things, but not necessarily be grounded in something that's your true north, and it really dictates who you are.
The big driver and the things that we focus in on is that principles. What are your values? Do you focus on integrity? Do you focus on honesty, courage, respect? These things are important. These things are important to map out and to look at and to remind yourself, because it helps you feel that everything that you're doing every day, every week is pointed towards something. And that, I think, especially for men, that's that sense of accomplishment. Like if you don't know who you are, the world will tell you who you are. And I think that is true. You will rely more on external things to build that framework for you if you're not putting in the thoughtfulness that you do deserve, that you deserve that. And I think you need to be aware of it. And that is something that we push hard for people to be aware of, because like you said, life is hard. It's hard. It's ever changing. But if you have something to anchor yourself to and have that compass, it makes you feel a little more at ease. That is part of that reset where everything feels chaotic outside of you, like a hurricane. You are still in that eye of the hurricane where it's calm and you have control over that.
Well, Nick, let's move to this next phase of the conversation. I want to bust a few myths. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions here and just want to hear your answers to this. So myth number one, mental performance is a soft skill. What do you say to the worker or supervisor who thinks that this is soft skill territory?
Oh, they all think it at first. So we do. It is something that we experience, and it is something you do upfront have to sell. And so a couple of ways that we have the conversation, right, is that if it was unnecessary, it wouldn't be in billion-dollar industries in the sports. You wouldn't have dedicated sports psychologists, mental performance coaches that are attending to billion-dollar sports for multi-million players, right? It is important because they're realizing it is high stake and, again, high consequence from a money perspective. And they, if they're from the business perspective, if they want to make their money, the psychology is so important because it fuels the physical behaviors. They want people to focus on their sleep. They want people to have the right fuel and the right nutrition. They want people to work on their recovery, work on their strength. That's all driven by psychology, right? I mean, how many people that are listening started a New Year's resolution this year and it's not happening right now? It happens every year. I mean, if you go look at the gym, it's busy January and February, and then it stops. Why? It's not because they're not physically able to do it. It's because of the psychology aspect. That is how crucial it is, especially for, if you're talking about field employees. They work on their skill, they work on their craft, but their mood and their mental state is undulating. And depending on where you get that knowledge, it's just not going to be aware. Because if you are in that fight or flight and something's going on, something's happening, and you're reactive and you don't have control over your mental state and you don't have that self-awareness, errors are going to be made. Equipment might be break, potentially lives might be lost. So it is crucial. I think the mental aspect is really, to me, that missing piece.
Myth number 2, pushing through and not showing weakness is what tough workers do. What does your experience actually say about the workers who suppress versus the ones who regulate, and who lasts longer and performs better?
Inevitably, just like a sports team, if you're a star player and you're pushing through, but then all of a sudden you're a basketball player and you're pushing through a shoulder issue, and then one day you wake up like, I can't lift my arm. Well, I can't lift my arm. How am I going to shoot a basketball? Now my team is down. So there is this short-term strategy for a long-term loss. That's really what the silent suffering does. It's short-term. It's a short-term win, long-term loss. And I think that's what happens. You will end up working with short-numbered in crew, which makes you more vulnerable. It makes you that you're going to have more mistakes. You might be doing a role that you don't normally do and have more hats on. It is actually detrimental to the team. It's kind of anti-brotherhood in a sense, because you're not playing the long game. You're not going to make it to the playoffs. You're not going to make it to the championship. And so you think that making it through the day is the win, but making it through the season, being durable, being present, being there, that's kind of the brother's keeper aspect. So I think that is the myth. And yeah, I'm hoping through this conversation we are myth busting it.
I love it. Myth number 3, experience makes you immune to mental performance breakdowns. Why is a 20-year veteran sometimes more at risk than new hires, not less?
I like to think of it like driving. So if you look at driving, if you're driving a route that you've never driven before, you're going to be really focused on where you're going. You're going to look at the signs, you're going to be looking at your navigation. You're going to be really in tune, because you don't want to get lost, right? So you're less likely to speed through something. You're less likely to deviate from it. On the flip side, if you're driving that constant route, I think we've all had it where, you're driving somewhere and it's like, oh, I'm at my exit. Like, when did this happen? Right? You go on autopilot,
Yeah.
right? And so when you're driving that common route, you're more likely to go on autopilot. You're more likely to kind of speed through it because it seems familiar. You're more likely to do ad hoc shortcuts. And I think that thing where the routine driving route rolls over to the experienced employee, they'll do the same thing. They become complacent, right? It's muscle memory. And right. So yeah, kind of what to do, but sometimes the environment does change. And when you're not focused and aware of that, that's where things happen.
That's a great answer. Myth number 4, you can't train mental performance. You either have it or you don't. What's the evidence that mental performance is actually trainable, and how fast can a worker actually change?
How long does it take to change a habit? The simplest way that I look at it, because I think you can change it today if you wanted to. It's not everything, but you can start somewhere. Meaning that if you can't do, I'll give you like a gym example. If you can't do 1 set of 10, can you do 10 sets of 1? Right? How can you break things into pieces? Because we'll talk ourselves out of doing things. Well, can you make it very, very small? I can't go to the gym for an hour. Well, can you do a 10-minute workout at home? So I think it's a mindset that you may have that is fixed, to think that, it is what it is. But to be able to build your self-awareness through the reflection on all the things that we just talked about, that you are empowered and you can make changes, even as small as they are. It's all about momentum, right? You can't, the silent sufferer to me is kind of like just trying to white knuckle it through things. And that if you really pan back, you'll realize you don't have to white knuckle it if you can set yourself up for success. And you can it doesn't have to happen overnight. Do small things. We teach, we talk about habit stacking. So start with one small habit and then put another habit on top of it. So I think that ownership and through the self-reflection and seeing that these skills are actually doable lets it be known that, well, if I don't have it, I don't have it. I think that is more of an attitude than reality.
Great. Myth number 5, the final one. If you slow down to reset, you'll fall behind. What's the actual cost of not pausing, and what do the best workers do differently?
Great, great. I love that. It's kind of like, again, I love the sports. So if you're looking at the average player versus the great players, they know how to stop, reset, refocus, lock in. The importance of getting control of yourself and having that awareness that you are getting out of control is what separates yourself from maybe the average player and the elite player. The depth of your self-awareness is so important. I think that is really what separates, even from the workers' perspective, of those people who are really good or great workers. They realize that the mental aspect drives the physical aspect.
Yeah, and I love that quote. I think it's a Navy SEAL quote: "Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast." And when you take the time
Yeah.
to slow down, you're not doing rework. You're doing it right the first time. Nick, I want to double click on what you said about the impact of stress or fatigue and how the brain functions. So, what are some signs that people can look for, those early warning signs that maybe stress or fatigue is starting to wear them down? And even if they have this compass, they're grounded in their identity, there are these other factors that may just be chipping away at that resilience in the moment, and it's a warning sign for them to say, okay, I need to step back. This is probably what the problem is. I'm not acting like myself. I need to take care of myself.
I think a lot of the conversation that we have is around like coping, like to get you're gonna do some you're gonna have symptoms and ways that you're gonna cope from it. So an easy one is like when you wake up, do you feel like I need coffee? I need my nicotine. Like, can you live without? Can you go? You have to ask yourself, can I go a day without it, or can I? We do teach to like delay your coffee like for like 90 minutes, things of that sort. And I think that's one of the biggest driver is that if you are reliant on an external substance, then that means you're already running on empty. That is the easiest tail that you can get, right? And then on the back end, at the end of the day, is that do you rely on having to doom scroll to kind of mindlessly escape? Do you need alcohol every night? That's a huge one, right? So now you're trying to suppress yourself so you can relax. And so and it's so common in the culture that it's normalized. And so having these external things to cope from is a huge sign that you're not in control of something that you can be in control of, and you can build more structure and routine into that. You won't be heavily reliant on those things. So I think those are the quick take home kind of real world practical applications that they can easily self reflect on that we talk about, and those seem to bring a lot of like aha moments when we do have that discussion with them.
I've heard you talk about a framework when somebody can catch themselves in that moment. The 5 steps: trigger, notice, reset, align, respond. Can you maybe provide a little more color to those steps and how somebody might use that framework to be able to, you know, get back on track in that moment?
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm a huge Viktor Frankl fan, so that's that space between stimulus and response, right? And I just think that space, there's a lot of space, and there's a lot of things that can happen, and so we're trying to help them build more awareness. Again, because if you're fatigued and you're lacking sleep, you're going to have stimulus and a quick reaction. You're not going to leverage that space, and you have to create space. So there's in the most simplest ways, you got, we want to teach them to pause, right? Pause and regulate and reset. So what does that look like? So it's pause, deep breath. And it's always funny to tell them, oh, you need to breathe, but we teach them the mechanics of breathing. So to tell them, hey, like when you take a deep breath and you can calm down that vagus nerve because you're in fight or flight. Anytime, like what does it look like when somebody's panicking? They're shallow breathers, right? They're not getting enough oxygen. They're in fight or flight. Blood's getting pushed out to the extremities. Everything's right in their limbic system. They're not activating the prefrontal cortex because they're reactive. They need to survive. They need to run. They need to fight. They need to fight. So we're just, that's it, and that innate aspect of us. And so we teach them that we need to get out of that. And the breath, you tap into the physical to get into the psychological. And so we teach them that breath. You can do 30 seconds, just big inhale, big exhale, 2 or 3 of them. It's not time consuming. It's not going to change productivity. And so when you can do that, then you can reset. I can have a power phrase, right? That kind of starts to link in all the things that we're talking about. A power phrase, lock in, the same way you would talk like an athlete would. Lock in, and then again, you can reset with your MVP. How am I going to move this forward? Right? I'm not going to succumb to maybe a pressure to cut corners or anything like that. That's going to be that reactive just to get it done because I'm worried about being judged. I'm going to rely on my MVP because I have practiced it. I know it. And then I'm going to respond appropriately. So that is that we're teaching them those skills of what is happening in that space between stimulus and response.
And so once somebody understands that, another framework that I think is really helpful is that internal dashboard. So can you share a little bit more about like the signal light framework?
Yeah, the dashboard. We teach it like your car, right? Your car has all these things on the dashboard that tells you what is going on and how it's operating, because you don't want your car to break down on you and you're stuck on the side of the freeway. You tell them your mind has the same thing. You will experience it in different ways of what's happening. You're getting low on gas or whatever, the check engine light comes on. And so we talk to them about a red light, which is like I'm out of control. Yellow light is I'm losing control, and then green light I'm in control. And so there's gonna be things around your body language, things around your self-talk. And so when they can start to experience what they're feeling and experiencing in their body and what their mental state is reacting like in each one of those signal lights, then they can put routines to address them, right? Because that yellow light is probably the most important, because you're probably going to get into yellow light more often than not. But that yellow light is where you're going to transition into more reds, or you're going to transition back into the green. And so you need to be able to recognize that and have that depth of self-awareness. And so I do tell them, like, self-reflection creates self-awareness that increases your consciousness to what's going on. And so I think that's the importance of the yellow light, or the red light, yellow light, green light. It's a simple framework that you can plug in strategies to help you be more responsive. So you're less likely to make errors, because when you're reactive and you're acting off of instinct, you're more likely to make more errors. So how do we set yourself up for success? And that mindset between the red light, green light, yellow light is a key way of doing it.
So to reiterate, going from green to yellow, it's really critical that people have the skill to understand when they're in that yellow zone. And oftentimes that may be tough to recognize when you're in the yellow zone. Can you paint a picture for what it might look like for somebody going from green to yellow so that they can understand how to better recognize that?
I would say, generally speaking, green tends to be like when you're in a flow state, almost like you're connected to what you're doing. You're in tune. It feels natural. So there's a natural flow. There's more positive self-talk. There's enjoyment going on. Your posture is a little bit better. You're not slumped over. So these things are happening. As you get into it, there's a little bit of a shock if you start to transition. There's a momentum change that you might experience. It's kind of like, the way I like to think about it is like, if you watch like a football game. You watch a football game and there's one team dominating the other, right? So they're playing to win. But then all of a sudden, there's a fumble. I throw in an interception. And then you can see the way that the players are playing. They start to play not to lose. And so how they approach the work, or how they approach the game starts to change. And so you'll see that you might notice like, oh, I'm a hunch down, or you start to become aware of your self-talk. It's like, I can't make another mistake. I can't do this again, right? So you start to have that sliding. Things are sliding through your fingers. You might start to get a little tension in your shoulders if you're a person who holds tensions in your shoulders and your neck. And so you might have these physiological experience that are going to be different from when you're comfortable. And so being able to recognize that and to think about those when you're not in the situation is important. That's why you want to practice these skills and awareness of them when you're not there, when you're not in the moment. But that's essentially what we talk about, is that's helping them identify and walk through their body language, the physiological responses, the self-talk for the green, for the yellow, for the red, and what that looks like for them is very important. But generally, I think that's what they might experience.
Do you see a connection between identity and self-talk and how that uh, impacts somebody's ability to perform in a specific moment?
Absolutely. I think it's important to, if you know who you are and you know what then you'll know how you're going to do things. If you don't know the depth of who you are, then you're going to react to doing things. And it might be reacting to just, again, if you're in a crew, just reacting to how you think they would want you to react. You're playing a guessing game. You're trying to do mind reading because you want to fit in, and which is, important. You want to fit in with your crew, but that importance of having that identity, that link, that anchor, I think it's just crucial in all those high pressure, high consequence situations.
Why is it important for a crew to have these skills versus just one person on a crew? And how can somebody, encourage their team members to have positive self-talk, or to be reflective about um, being reactive in a situation, or to be grounded in identity? Seems like the team being focused on that and having that skill set is really important for the safety and performance.
You want the crew to have a common language in the same way you have a football team, right? You go into like a football stadium, or you go into the locker room, they'll have their things on their wall that are their shared values. And so it's important that something is also shared amongst the crew or the team that everybody resorts to. So we say, no, that these are our values. We are all heading in the right direction, because they have that brotherhood that they talk about. And this is the way to reinforce that brotherhood in the utility. Because if there's anything I can do to step up and help you, I want to do that in the same way I would do on a sports team. I want to look out. And so the camaraderie and the openness to share things like that, I think is crucial. And so I think it is kind of reframing, what it is to be a strong teammate. Right.
So when somebody sees someone else on their team maybe struggling, and they can tell that there's stress, there's somebody being reactive, what can they do in a way that's going to be productive to approach that person to help lift them up?
I think when all else fails, it's just be human, be personable. I think there's a lot of unfortunately, there is a lot of silent sufferers that is in that space where a lot of we'll just say, even just from a society, that men just suppress. Lack of better words, they'll suppress. So another way of suppressing is that silent sufferer. So we want to be able to say, we want to create an environment where you don't have to be silent anymore. You can ask for help. You can share, you don't have to be in detail what's going on, but you just like, I didn't get a good sleep last night. You can be honest. Like, I didn't get good sleep. You don't have to tell everybody why you didn't get good sleep or stuff that's going on, but being able to admit, like, I didn't get good sleep, just, keep an eye on me. I think that's huge. I mean, I don't think even that basic thing, goes on, or, where someone can. We see trouble with people asking for help to do lifting. We talk about paired lifting techniques all the time and support. So I think that is where we need to go. To be able to ask for help is actually seen as a strength, to be able to say, I didn't get enough sleep. last night, and it's like, oh, you did, okay, well, cool. I'm gonna keep an eye out on you, and I'll make sure to give you some extra help based off of wherever the work's going to be done. We'll have better strategy of how I can be a better teammate to you today. And because how humans work, it's like, oh yeah, I remember you helped me out yesterday. I'm gonna pay you back, and then that's how you start to change the culture. It goes, so I think, unfortunately, I think that's a ball that is hard to get momentum on. But I think those are the easiest, smallest things you can do is just offer help. I think people appreciate offer help. Men operate off of respect and appreciation. So any way that you can lend a helping hand, I think it does go a long way, because there's some aspects of the culture. So it's like nobody really offers us help, and so when you can do that, I think it is meaningful. It's more meaningful than we realize.
And speaking to that culture, it seems like we almost reward suppression of emotion. And, it's that gritted out mentality where you don't talk about your struggles, you don't talk about what's hard. How do people get past that and maybe take small steps to changing that culture so that you can build that bond on the crew?
That's a hard one. I think it still starts at the individual, because every group is made up of a bunch of individuals, right? So in the group, in the culture, they're just reinforcing these behaviors. So again, men operate off of respect and appreciation, and just humans, basically, humans operate off of signaling and conditioning. So what are we signaling and conditioning that is getting you the earned respect and appreciation? Is it the right thing? Is it the medicine, or is it the poison? So what are those behaviors that we are rewarding within the culture? And so I think being able to step back and be like, I'm going to be different. And if your MVP is different, and you're not going to reward the poison, which is silent suffer, walk it off, toughen up. If you're not going to feed into that beast, then you're going to be the change. You're going to be the pivot within the group. And I think that's where it does start in changing the culture or the dynamics of the crew.
It can be pretty intimidating to get in front of a whole crew and start to bring some of these concepts to them. What are tell us a little bit about maybe some of the scar tissue and some of the best practices that you've learned in terms of how to introduce some of these concepts to groups that may traditionally not be very open to these concepts.
One of the things that's helped me is to practice what I preach. And so I think it's important for you as an instructor, to show that you can be self-led, and with every single topic have something about how you're putting it into play, and then that humanizes it, that makes it not so much abstract anymore, right? It's something that's tangible, because they hear and see how you're doing it. I think that is the big key. So if you're going to start teaching these concepts, start doing the concepts, because you're going to run into the same barriers that they are. We all do it. We all talk ourselves out of doing things like, 2 more slices of pizza, I'll be all right. I'll go to the gym tomorrow, or just one more drink, or I'll restart on Monday, or I'll do it on the New Year's resolution. We all do that, right? So if you can start to get over those hurdles, and you can talk about how you also encountered them, and this is what you did, they'll see you as someone who's valuable, someone who they should listen to, someone who they can turn to, which is, I think, something that's needed. It's kind of, to me, like there's that male modeling aspect, and that's it. If you show that you're doing it, they can do it.
So for someone who is leading a crew, what is one thing that they can do just in the day-to-day work that's reinforcing this with their crew?
If you're trying to get the crew to do a pre-work warm-up, it's not going to work if you're sitting in the back office having your coffee and donut being like, oh, did you guys do your warm-up yet? It's not going to fly, right? You have to lead by example. You need to be present. You need to be sharing that. So then when you can almost make it like a brainstorming session. Oh yeah, I was, looking at your red light, green light, yellow lights. Have a conversation with one person. It doesn't have to be everybody, but if you start chipping away at it and share how you're putting it into play, it humanizes these things, and it starts to normalize it. And when you start to normalize it, that's where you start to pick up momentum.
What is one thing leaders are doing right now, probably with good intentions, that is actively reinforcing the problem?
Production over safety, I think is a common thing, right? So if you're putting production over safety, in my mind, it also encourages silent suffering, the suppression. I got to get it done at all cost, and men will do it. Men will get it done, and if you're giving them earned respect and appreciation, that's going to reinforce it, right? That's the signals and conditioning. So we need to figure out how to do that and to call it out. Because I still think that is generally a big thing.
Do you feel like safety and operational output are in conflict, or can they coexist?
Honestly, like a big problem that um, we don't truly have a good conversation on, and how optics is fueling production over safety. Is it when we start having people stop work more often because because it needs to be stopped, and because we're not worried about that challenge of we're going to delay putting on the power an hour or two because of X, Y, and Z, and then the leaders stand by it. That's going to be huge. But if there's still conflict within the leadership of doing that, it's just going to crumble on the bottom. It's going to crumble on the operation. So if we can manage optics all the way up the chain, you will start to remove the silent sufferer out of the equation.
Love that. So, Nick, there may be somebody listening to this conversation and they recognize that they're running on empty. What is your message for them?
Survive versus thrive, and being able to self-reflect and be like, yeah, I am in a survive state. I am constantly running on empty. I'm constantly feeling fatigued, but then having that self-reflection of what can I get better control of? And again, it starts with what's in here that needs to change. And I get it. It's hard because it is tied to some degree, it is tied to your identity. And I would say even bigger picture, especially if you have significant people, around you, if you have a family, kids, like you are modeling survival mode, and you want to teach them thrive, and you want to show them that. So you want to be that generational pivot in the bigger picture to not do that. And so I would hope for them is that they can take the things that we were talking about, today, and practice some solitude, on the drive home, 20 minutes, an hour, and really just reflect on what is one thing that you can make a change on. That's small. One thing that you can start and stop and continue and start there. I'm a big men's advocate for mental health, and for me, it's such a positive reinforcement to see how it's being accepted with groundmen and an apprentice, and how they open up and will tell you if you lead by example to show them it's okay, and how they will cross pollinate and share ideas amongst each other. There is so much strength to tap into. I think doing this is necessary.
I really appreciate you taking the lead. I think you're a great example for the rest of the industry in terms of how we can elevate performance. And the thing that I want to leave our listeners with is, piggybacking off of what you said earlier, I spent 15 years in professional sports and working with Olympians. Like, this mental performance aspect, it was one of the most important parts of their performance. I mean, these teams invested so much money in this aspect because they knew if they could give their athletes the tools to be successful, they're going to have the skills to lift themselves up and their team members, especially during those critical times. And for the workforce athletes who are listening to this, those critical times could be life-threatening. And so it all fits into your ability to be the best version of yourself, a brother's keeper, being able to take care of your team. Nick, where can people find out more about you or maybe connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn as well. I just recently started a Instagram account to really dive into and share more insights into some of the curriculum that we're teaching. So on Instagram, it's industrial underscore athlete underscore coach. And so, yeah, I'd love to connect to people. I'd love to have more conversations on this. Connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm going to continue to share more information about what we do, how we do it, and why we do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. And if you haven't already subscribed to the WorkReady Podcast, check out your favorite platform. It could be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Make sure to subscribe just because each Tuesday we're launching one of these new episodes, and we just want to make sure that you know about all these awesome conversations that are happening. So, Nick, one more time, thanks again. And until next time, take care of yourself, take care of your people, and stay work ready.